Beer bread is an ancient, simple recipe with infinite variations. Egyptian hieroglyphics show bread and beer being made together, and after one bite, you'll know why this treat has lasted for so long. There's something timeless about you too. If you have a good foundation of faith, prayer, and confidence, you'll be able to face all the different needs and situations that life brings with you. When you know who you are, you can honor where you are. I'm Jenny Randolph. Welcome to This Day. We're in the middle of October, and I know what you're thinking. Wow, that's a lot of ingredients. What is she up to this time? Oh my goodness, it looks super complicated. But that couldn't be further from the truth. This time, we are making all kinds of variations of beer bread. We're gonna be making a gluten and dairy-free one. We're gonna be making a chocolate cinnamon one that has a coffee porter and a really dark beer. And we're gonna be making an orange nutmeg made with a wheat beer. So let me break down the basic recipe for you. The first thing that you're gonna need is 3 cups of flour, of all-purpose flour. The next thing is gonna be a 1/4 cup of sugar. Then you're gonna need 3 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 cup of melted butter, and 1 12-ounce beer. Now there's your basic recipe. So the first one that we're gonna make is our gluten-free. Now this is not going to change very much from the original recipe that I gave you, except that we are changing it up for the gluten-free flour, and we're not using butter, we're using a vegan butter. So this one is gonna be vegan and gluten-free. So no dairy, no eggs, no anything. It's gonna be good for anybody that has an allergy. So I've already weighed out my 420 grams of my preferred gluten-free flour, and this time around, I'm using Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1 cup. It has a really nice consistency and it doesn't tend to get grainy. So that's what I prefer to use for this recipe. But if you have your very own gluten-free flour that you swear by, go ahead and use that. So let's add that to our mixing bowl. A 1/4 cup of melted vegan butter. And this is a gluten-free beer. Now there are lots of different kinds. This one happens to be a Two Brothers. I also have used Omission, but generally speaking nowadays you can find gluten-free beer in any kind of grocery store. Now we're gonna give it a really good mix, and don't forget, when you're working with gluten-free flour, you're gonna mix it for a little bit longer than you would if you were using all-purpose. So we're gonna mix this really good to get some air into it, some volume into it. So we're gonna mix it for about 4 minutes. So I'm gonna put my batter into a prepared pan, and I've just coated the pan with vegetable shortening. Now I'm gonna set this one aside and mix the other 2, and then they'll all go into the oven at the same time. So this is variation number 1. Now we started out again with the basic ingredients: flour, baking powder, salt, and sugar. And that never changes, that always stays the same. But this time around, we're gonna be adding nutmeg and we're gonna be adding orange zest. Now save the rest of the orange because we're gonna be using the orange juice inside of it to make a glaze on the top of this one. Now the next thing that we're gonna add to this is nutmeg. And anytime fall comes around, nutmeg is in full force in our house. I like using whole nutmeg. It just gives it a fresher taste. And we're looking for about a 1/4 of a teaspoon of nutmeg. Now because we're using orange and nutmeg in this, the complementary beer is a wheat beer or any kind of IPA. It's just going to bring out the natural flavors of what the beer is flavored with, of the orange, of the nutmeg. It just works. So if you're gonna make this variation, use your favorite wheat beer. We're gonna add this all to our mixing bowl, our melted butter, and our beer. Because we're using an all-purpose flour this time, mix it until it is just combined. So again, we're just going to add this to a already prepared loaf pan. And set this one aside as well while we fix our last one. Now once again, we're gonna start with our base recipe, but instead of adding regular sugar to this one, we are adding brown sugar because we're making a cinnamon chocolate beer bread. So you'll want a 1/4 cup of packed light brown sugar, a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 3/4 of a cup of dark chocolate. Now for the cinnamon chocolate bread, I am using a dark beer, a stout, and this one happens to be a bourbon barrel coffee stout. And I love coffee and chocolate together, so this beer is gonna be perfect. But you can use any dark beer. So once again, into a prepared baking pan. Now before this one goes into the oven with the rest of them, I like to top it with a little bit more sugar and a little bit more cinnamon. Now all 3 go into the oven at 375 for 1 hour. So while the bread is cooking, I'm gonna put together an orange glaze for our orange wheat nutmeg beer bread. We wanna take the juice of 1/2 of an orange and a couple of tablespoons of powdered sugar. I'm just gonna mix that together, see how it looks. It's gonna be the perfect glaze to go on top of that bread. Also, while the bread is in the oven, I wanted to take a minute and speak to you about something that came to light as I was preparing these recipes to share with you. And as I was making all of the variations, it occurred to me that there was that basic beginning beer bread recipe, right? And that's kind of like us, where we have our basic who we are, our identity, who we say that we are, but we also have just this multifaceted personality, right? So for example, the mom me is very different than the wife me, or maybe the business me, or maybe the friend me. And so we all have different facets of that same base personality, kind of like how the bread, you can add stuff and take stuff away and substitute things. Sometimes it can get really jumbled and you can feel stretched and pulled and you don't know who you are. And I really believe that that is where faith comes in, and your basic foundation, your basic spiritual foundation. It doesn't really matter what you believe, but believe in something, because if you have that base faith, if you have that base foundation that is tried and true, just like our recipe, we know it works, then you can go out and you can experiment with different kinds of the hats that you wear. For me, I wear a lot of different hats. For example, I'm lead director at our church. I own this company, this day, and this show. I'm a cook, and I'm a mom, and I'm a wife, and there's all of these things, and I'm a sister and a daughter, and all of those take different subtle changes. But because I have a good foundation and I know who I am and I know where I come from and I have that true faith of whose child I am, because we're all children of God, we can go out and we can face the day no matter what hat that we wear. So I hope that you take a little piece of this today and realize that it's okay to be different in different occasions, that it's okay to be different or feel different or act different depending on where you are or what you're facing today. So I absolutely love the way that these turned out. Now we just want to finish off our orange nutmeg one. You remember that glaze that we made, so I'm going to take a toothpick and I'm just going to poke down a couple of places, run that glaze all over the top of it. Now all you have to do is wait for them to cool, and then you can turn them out of the loaf pans and you're ready to eat. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you're already subscribed, hit that notification bell just so that you know whenever I upload a new video. Thanks again for stopping by. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.